Alright, well, hi everybody. Welcome to this video for the Lichess4545. This is my round 2 game. This is quite a crazy game. There is a lot of tactics happening in the very beginning, and it really kind of swings all over the place. So let's get started. Real quick before we do start on the game, though, I want to say thank you for watching. I also want to say if there is a specific kind of video that you would like to see on this channel, please let me know as I'm revamping and restarting the channel, trying to get a lot more content up. I kind of want to know what do you all want to see. So if you want to see blitz streams, we can do that. Or if you like this analysis type video, I love doing those. Whatever you want to see, if you have something specific in mind, please just make a comment and let me know. All right, so round 2, I am playing as the black pieces, and I was able to do a little bit of preparation here. I was helping a teammate prepare for their game earlier in the week, and they said that they kind of wanted to play the Dutch. I have never really played the Dutch before in my life, so I did a little research so I could help them prepare a little bit. And I kind of got really intrigued and interested in the Dutch, and I started with Simon Williams, Ginger GM. He's got a lot of great free content out there, and he did a good job. He pulled me in, so I bought his The Killer Dutch course on Chessable, and I started to go through it, and I was pretty sure my opponent was going to play a London system, so I focused on those chapters first, since I only had a week. But I'm very excited to go through the rest of it. So if you're looking for something new or something on the Dutch, I'd recommend it. So let's get started. D4, F5, here we go. Getting to play my Dutch. Nothing unexpected here. I knew that my opponent was going to play the London just like this. And after E3, B6. So Simon's recommendation is to play b6, bishop b7, and then to play this pretty unique move, bishop to d6, with the idea to swap off the d pawn, or the dark squared bishop here. So my opponent played bishop e2, bishop b6, and then h4. This is was a huge shock to me in the game. I guess it should not necessarily have been, because this is kind of how a London system player wants to play, right? Get their material, maybe get their queen over here, come down here, maybe, push, sack, mate in the end, right? But I was not really prepared, and I went back and looked in my material, and actually this response is not something that is there at all. So there are some lines where white might play h3, but his analysis of these is just, well, it's just fine here, but white's going to take, and this move is not going to serve much of a purpose anymore. Kind of the more quote-unquote main line that I was looking at, if white castles, bishop d6, knight e5, this is the move that my opponent played. So if you play knight e5 here without having played h4, then the idea is castle, develop, come back, and you're going to play d6 here. And you've got some, some middle game position now. And black feels pretty good. But, of course, that's not what we got. So h4, bishop d6, I decide, we still want to trade this off. 95, so 95 is not the move that Simon thinks is the most testing of this bishop d6 move. That is to take. His idea being because black is pretty comfortable in that other line without h4, with the knight here, because you can get time to kind of rearrange and play d6. So played back, I thought about, castling, but now that h4 has been played, that seems a little dangerous. I'm not sure if I want to castle this direction at all. So I thought, let's play bishop d6 or bishop e7 and d6 right away. I mean, maybe just knight c6 is kind of a better idea. This is a really nice intermezzo from white, kind of forcing black to play g6, which gives you something to go at, to push later and come back. But after something like this, I mean, now black is going to be able to castle queenside comfortably. White probably still wants to castle queenside as well. They've got to move this knight first. Like, I think that black here is okay. So probably I should have gone in for this. But honestly, I just didn't even really think about this. I definitely have the problem in my own game. I know is I don't take enough time. I don't have enough patience all the time, and so I go for complications or an attack when it's not time yet. And so just safely developing with knight c6 honestly didn't even occur to me in the game, when it probably definitely should have. So after bishop e7, this knight's intermezzo works again. And now even here I probably could have played knight c6 or maybe even knight e4. Knight e4 I thought about in a lot of lines, but just was kind of wary of pinning this piece here. But even after knight d2, I mean, okay, I've got enough on it. What are you going to do? Take? Like, I can play, I can play d5 if I really need to at some point, and move into more of a stonewall setting or something. Like, and this, after this, I mean, black definitely has to feel really comfortable. But yeah, seeing ghosts at some point, seeing ghosts with this pin down this file. So I played queen c8, which again is the move in the line without h4, but with knight e5. And this is my other problem, and especially learning a new opening. I mean, I've only been studying the Dutch for a week, and I played some blitz games with it, but this is my first long time control game with it. So just making sure, if you're doing that, if you're in kind of a similar situation, when you get a new move, try to really think for yourself. Don't just rely on, well, I know in a similar position, something like this. How does this change things? Really, I'm starting to get some pressure over here, so how can I quickly get castle to the other side? Try to think through those implications as opposed to just saying, well, this must probably be good, because it's not great. So h5, white really is pushing here to really kind of come in. And yeah, g5, this is a move that I did not think about in this position, but I did think about in a different line. And I'm just going to turn this move arrow off. There we go. I did think about it in a different line, but even here the computer is kind of suggesting just give this pawn up, get rid of that, get a little bit of pressure on your own. Now black's probably trying to fight from behind for the rest of this game here, but it's a little bit better than what we go in for. So instead I go for d6, which gives white a lot of opportunity here. Takes, and now I've always got this problem. I've always got this problem and this problem. There's a lot of problems that I'm constantly having to work out and worry about over here. So at this point, I was looking for I was looking at two main moves, and the move order was starting to appear to be really important here. The computer already has black kind of like toasted here. The computer puts us at like +4 for white. The benefit of this position, though, is that the complications are enormous and it's very messy, and there's a lot of opportunity for white to go astray. So the computer is just kind of saying, like, maybe just like knight a6, just like get developed and try to get out of the way somehow, but it doesn't see it holding. So I think practically maybe it's better to go in for the complications in this line. especially if you're not playing a GM, because you just are going to try to go into that crazy wild forest and see who can come out, right? So the moves I was looking at here: bishop takes f3, and d takes e5. And looking at it now, I kind of prefer bishop takes f3 first, I think, but I made a little bit of a mistake, a mental calculation mistake in the game, because I was worried about bishop takes f3, queen takes f3. Okay, now you've got this here that you've got to worry about. So you want to play here, and then I was worried about some line with g7, rook here, and then the queen coming and checking here, which is a move I was looking at, if the bishop comes here. And I said, well, I think I'd rather have the bishop check me on h5 than the queen, but I completely missed that the knight is covering h5. So the queen really can't go and check me there. So this is not horrible for black. I mean, again, your black is cramped and black is fighting from behind here, but it's not so bad as it was a minute ago. So that's the line that I was kind of worried about with bishop takes f3, but again, it was something that was playable. So instead I played d takes e5 with the idea that in this g7 bishop checks line, well, I'd rather have the bishop there. Now, of course, I can't really take with the knight in those lines because the queen just follows down, and then I'm in an awful position, but what can you do? I just missed it, right? So takes, and then now what? Well, you can play bishop takes here maybe, right? You can just play d takes here. Bishop takes here probably is not great because you want some pressure down this file. So white has a lot of options, and I was a little worried about starting with this because this seems to misplace the queen a little bit. But then as I looked at it more and more, it really seems like, now you're really giving black pressure. And so you can't really play this because you're letting black into the game here so much. If you just play takes and queen here, now what? Moving this, and black's really solved a lot of problems, and they have their own pressure now that becomes really dangerous. You can play just knight e4, and now the position is starting to look not as good for white at all, and black probably has a really strong push here. So you can't take there, and bishop takes just like releases the hold on black, right? Again, you want some pressure down the d file here, and you want, this pawn. If you put your pawn on e5, it really gets to be like stuck in black's throat. And after knight bd7 here, black has got to be fine, if not a little bit better. So white does correctly play d takes, and then again, I'm always kind of still looking for this. Now do I want to play this now? And maybe something in here, but now c4, but I mean this position is just so complicated. Let's say knight takes, queen takes is a mistake actually, because after bishop d3, or no, I think bishop takes g6 even, here and here, no, sorry, g6, what am I, yeah, bishop takes g6, right? Now white's pressure is gone, and black is doing just fine. So you don't even really want to play, or if after c4 and here, you've got to play, take this first, which is maybe natural, but there's just so many complications in this position. It's really kind of wild, and of course my opponent and I missed a lot of them as we were going through. But I played knight bd7 with the idea to let white take, give the piece back. Right, I'm up a piece here. White has my g pawn, but I took their knight. So give the piece back and just try to get through here. So actually, just playing this knight out to either d2 or c3 here is the strongest move for white. Just kind of waiting, and you don't have to go anywhere. Your pressure is so strong. You've got so many threats. Just whatever. Just knight d2 or even knight c3. And now you're going to win the bishop in the end here. But this is a crazy line, of course, to try to calculate through over the board to see that you're going to win this bishop all the way at the end. And you're going to win the bishop, right, because you can't really play the king up because of white's own bishop here. And you can't go over here because you're going to lose the queen. So, you know, asking to calculate that many moves down when there's so many things in between here is a tough call. To see that you're going to be all right in the end. But I think, again, another moral of this position is just you've got great pressure. You've got black pretty stuck. Black is going to start to run out of moves here that are helpful at all. Just wait, right? Just wait. Develop. Get all your pieces in the attack. Get this knight out. That gives you the opportunity to maybe even wait more and castle if you want to. So instead, white takes, and I decided to take back with the bishop here to maybe in some lines get some counterplay this way. It does potentially give up some things over here if takes or if rook takes. So let's say like rook takes h7, bishop takes this way, something like this, or maybe you know, just kind of leaving these here, not jumping in too quickly, because again, white's going to have something like this maybe. And again, these are not things that I saw when I decided on bishop f6 over knight f6. I just thought like, well, I'm going to get some counterplay at some point in some lines if I need it. So now my opponent plays knight c3. But now that we've clarified this position in the center a little bit, it's actually not as helpful, and it gives black the opportunity to recapture this pawn and really calm down the position a lot. I was very happy when we reached this position because I was sure, just like 3 moves beforehand, that I was dead. And we didn't even go over all the lines that are there. I mean, you've got all these move order variations and all these tactics, and clearly, you know, white had this knight c3 move in mind, which they said after the game as well. But just playing it one move later, you know, instead of playing this first, really made a big difference here, because now I've eliminated the pressure on this file and I feel a lot easier. The computer still likes white here for like plus 1, plus 1.5, something like that, but obviously this is much more comfortable to play as black than it was a few minutes ago. The craziest part is there's still some swings of evaluation left in this position. There's a lot that still happens here, and we get into like a very interesting endgame in the end. So after this, queen e2, and white is just looking to castle. I don't have enough time to get organized and castle myself in response, so my king is going to be stuck for a little bit here. So I have this idea to play knight or bishop takes, g takes, and knight here with this threat, thinking that my opponent is going to have to recapture at some point. There's a tactic that we get to in a minute that actually makes this not as good. And another thing is that now with this pawn here, white can really start to push these pawns. So maybe I could have just played knight e5 first, threaten the idea without having to play it yet, and then white is a little forced to play takes, castles, And it might end up coming to the same thing, but again, move order can sometimes be really important. But I decided to play take, and my opponent just castles, and I play here, which is a pretty big blunder. It's very hard to spot, though. So I'll give you a second, see if you can spot the move for white here. The trick here is to notice black's king is so open, and how is that exploitable? So white played rook h1, which doesn't work, and I actually blundered back and moved this bishop. So in this position, because this tactic is still hanging out on the board that neither of us saw, the computer wants you to play into this endgame. Take here with this idea. And I looked at this actually, and I thought about it, and I did seriously consider it because it seems like you're going to really shut out white's bishop for a while. I just really hate playing rook against two minors unless it's super clear. I find the times that I've done it, I'm always with just one piece. I'm always just kind of scrambling a little bit too much. In this case, this probably does wind up in a draw because your black's king is pretty good and active, and in the center you can play e5 really quickly, and the bishop is not going to have a lot to do for a little bit. But I was just nervous about it, and I hadn't seen that this tactic was hanging out on the board here. So the tactic is very simple, just queen e2. With the idea that this is not a safe square for the knight to retreat to anymore, because the queen's got a fork. But neither my opponent or myself saw this, and so we just completely played through it. But this is just, winning now for white. White just has to convert up a whole piece, basically. So luckily for me, we didn't see it. And I'd move the bishop. My opponent misses it again. Threatening the knight, but without being able to come to this square, doesn't get you anything because I can defend. So here, I thought I spotted a really interesting tactic. So at this point, my opponent and I are starting to get low on time. We're both under 10 minutes or so here, and I think we're both under 5 at this point. Somewhere in the realm around here, my opponent offered a draw. I don't know if it was right. I think it maybe was last move, or it might be a few moves from now, but I kind of felt that, like, I don't know, there's still a lot of play left in this position. I don't love to take a draw unless it's really obvious. There's a lot of play left here, and on top of that, my team, I knew there was another game happening at the same time, so I didn't know what was happening in that game, but I knew really we needed a win and not a draw, so I was like, well, let's keep playing on. I wasn't too worried in this position, so I mean, I can always blunder, obviously, clearly, but I was like, let's keep playing, let's play on. So I thought I spotted a tactic with g5 here. It doesn't end up working, it doesn't throw the game away, but my idea was, I didn't see this move, but it still doesn't change anything. The idea was, if the queen comes here, I play rook to d8, and now I'm threatening still g5. I'm also threatening at some point to take and then recapture with the queen, and now my rook on the d file is really valuable. But this is not very good because this actually blunders and loses to knight e4. If f takes, queen takes, and black is in a fair amount of trouble here with these pieces coordinating really well. But the moral of this game story is my opponent didn't see this, and you don't need to see this to escape from my ideas. So maybe they got too concerned with my ideas and they play queen h5, worried about g5, trying to get away from that. So I here decide to go in for this endgame that is queens off and bishop versus a knight with the rooks on, because I figured in this position my bishop must be the better piece, and it might end up being a draw, but probably I'm not afraid of anything here. So I do swap off. There's a nice little trap for white here if black misplays. I'll give you a second. So if black decides to play king g6, rook takes check is this really nice move, and then you get this fork in, and it's over for white. So you can't play that. So I just simply play rook up, taking away the fork and chasing the knight, or chasing the rook away. And here both of us start to get a little obsessed with what's happening on the queen side and harassing this knight and moving this knight. The computer just wants you to start to push these pawns basically and make a go for it. Take your 3-2 majority to town and try to convert it, and just start off with g4. Instead I say a6, and I'm going to try to harass this knight, but I can't really trap this knight over here. The bishop's not in a good enough spot. The king's not over there. Like, just with the rook and these pawns, I can't really trap this knight. So we play this dance a little bit. And here, actually, I had an idea of knight takes, rook, knight b4, something like this. So that was my idea, to leave that pawn, pawn unguarded. And now I'm always having to be careful again for, you know, some knight tricks. If my king ends up over here or something, I'm just always trying to make sure I know all the squares that the knight can jump to avoid any forks. And I thought what we were going to see here, I thought my opponent was going to play in here, and I was prepared to go in for this. And I thought that with these pawns rolling so quickly and my king right here able to get up and move, that probably this was better for black, but that would have been a tough win, I think. But instead, my opponent is still just playing around with the knight here, kind of going for it together. There's a few evaluation swings back and forth, even in those last like 4 moves. Some opportunities missed, but there's a lot in this game. I don't want to overwhelm too much. So I'm just kind of keeping pushing here. And here, actually, it's funny because I did not want to take here, because I thought now with both of these pawns supporting, it's not as good for black, because it's going to be easier for white to have them and have this passer as counterplay, as opposed to before it was going to be isolated and I could attack it with the rook if need be. But the computer wants you to take here, actually, and still just go for it. Like, just get those pawns rolling. And white has a hard time here, actually. I mean, this is just winning for black here. So another opportunity missed on my end. My opponent and I both missed. This is definitely a version of you know, whoever makes the next to last mistake kind of game, because this evaluation just goes back and forth all the time. Instead, I decide to go for this this weak f7 pawn, and this is there's a saving. I don't know if it's a saving to a draw, but there's an idea here that's tough to see for white that helps a lot, and that's the idea to play knight e2 at some point. You can play it now, or you can play it in a move or two, with the idea that it's helping to prevent g3 from coming in. Whoa, excuse me. It's helping to prevent g3 from coming in. So my opponent instead moves the king over again. But even here, if you play knight here, excuse me, not here. Yeah, you want to play it here before I can capture. So that after rook h2, rook f1. and black still probably has an edge here, and you're starting to really tie down white's pieces, but you're still playing. You're still playing, right? So instead, my opponent walks the king over. But after g3 now that I get a chance to put this move in, now black's really in the driver's seat because now these pawns are really going to roll. And I've got a lot of pressure here. So take, that's fine. I'll take, and I'm just in the position now. a3. You can take here now again and just count on these pawns being so weak and really being able to roll and have control, and you have the white king locked in. But that didn't even actually occur to me. It probably should have, because that knight has a pretty good post, so why not? But here, and again, we're really in time trouble now. This is a 45-minute game with a 45-second increment, so there was more than once that my opponent was down below 45 seconds in these positions and starts to make a few errors. So rook f1, you let the bishop take away this pawn. That can only be helpful, right? I thought for a second I was just going to win the rook. I missed that the king can go back to e2, so we repeat the position for a moment. But now I start thinking about, okay, how can I stop the king from going to e2? How can I maybe fork if need be at some point on e2? E2 becomes a really important square, so f4. Rook takes, bishop takes, obviously. Might have been practically not a bad try for my opponent, because knight first rooks can be difficult endgames, but I'm going to be able to pick up this pawn really quickly. I'm probably going to be able to pick up this pawn as well, and just going to be able to roll. So e takes, and here, and now I've got a lot of threats coming. This and this combined with e2 is very nasty. So my opponent plays rook f. I mean, what happens, for example, if my opponent just waits and goes away, right? Rook to d2, king steps away. I could play e2 here, or I can also just play rook takes. Rook takes knight and e2, and now you can't. The best you can do here is to play against the bishop now, but with two pawns here, and your king is so far away from these, I'm going to clean up these pawns really quickly. There's not really a good chance here. So my opponent tries to go in for something else instead, but now the rook is really shut out, and I can even, I can play this right away, or I could probably even wait a move and take a pawn or something, because what is that rook going to do now? And here my opponent just blunders away a piece in low time trouble. But now, again, even a4 fails to this same move, and after e2 you can't even give up the rook to queen. So white's really in a tough spot here. I think if maybe something like knight c2, you get this interesting line where you pick up the piece this way. And now maybe playing in this rook and bishop endgame gives white some chances, but still, I mean, obviously black should win this, but maybe this is more practically a little bit more difficult because you can harass the king a little bit more. Instead, my opponent played knight to e2, which after check just gives up the piece, and white resigned here. So I hope you enjoyed this game. It was a wild game. I mean, think about, back here on move 10 or so, black is in a really difficult position, especially after d6, which was a pretty big error on black's part, to get all the way to that endgame there. So I hope you enjoyed seeing the game. I hope you enjoyed my analysis of it, and I will see you for next week's round.